successfully.
Yes, it did.
And it was a critical time for the northern regions, because we know the crucial role that the Yana had played,
Yes.
and what the position continues to mean to the people.
Yes.
And the NDA is a very, very key partner in development in the north. What have you been up to the past couple of years? Because we know that there's a quest to get the north to catch up with development as it happens in the south.
Yes.
Is it happening? Are you achieving the goals you set out for yourselves?
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. I think the NDA was established, as you indicated in the introduction, by an act of parliament to coordinate and facilitate development in the 5 northern regions. And since its establishment almost 6 years ago, a lot has happened. The NDA was established, was nested in the Ministry for Special Development Initiatives, MSDI, and most of the projects and programs that the NDA was involved with were linked with the activities of the ministry, but also the government's flagship programs, the infrastructure projects for the alleviation of poverty in the 5 northern regions, but also the government's One Village, One Dam program. All those programs were nested within the ministry, and the NDA was connected with those activities one way or the other. And a lot has happened because many dams have been constructed, roads, boreholes, schools, CHIPS compounds for health services, and so on and so forth. And I think one needs to recognize that in places like northern Ghana, one of the problems we have is everything I've mentioned, whether it's roads or water, they are really in severe demand, in very acute. So anything that anyone does to tackle these human-centered needs is always one step in the right direction. And that's what's happened over the last 6 years. A lot has happened in terms of carrying out the activities that I've mentioned across northern Ghana.
Agriculture is a big thing for the north as well, because of the temperature and the climate of the north. The One Village, One Dam, for example, initiative becomes very key. Would you say that it's turned agric into a more viable business for the people of the north? For example, are you able to tell us how many dams you've been able to facilitate construction of, how many are still in operation, and how it has changed the farming lives of people there?
I think the first thing I want to say is that the north, as we all know, has one period of rainy season, and with climate change and desertification, water has become increasingly very, very. That's the negative side, or the problematic side. But then the other side of it is that if you look at, I'm going afar afield before I come to answer your question. If you go to Burkina Faso, right now as we see, we import tomatoes and onions from Burkina, and Burkina is drier than Ghana, and yet they have this, and that's because they have, in every community, you have dams or dugouts. Those dams that have been built, we have over 500 dams were constructed. There's been a lot of debate and questions about whether these are dams or...
Where are the dams?
Yes, but the thing is, fundamentally, thinking about providing water, making water accessible to communities, farming communities in the north, is a fundamental structural importance, because there is no water. As we sit right now, it's a dry season. You go to most villages, people are sitting around. Those who do not have dams, there's nothing they can do. But in places where they have dams, some people are doing vegetable farming, some people are doing fishing. In some areas, livestock production is increasing because animals can graze. There are challenges in terms of the quality of some of the dams that were made. But these are areas that can be worked upon. But I think fundamentally, thinking about making water access an important thing is really, really, really important for the north. Because there isn't, as I was saying, no source of water for animals and human consumption. And for agriculture, irrigation is something that will play a major role. And investments of that nature do take time to really solidify or take root. As you know, even if you dig a borehole, there are also always problems, whether the water is salty, is it pumping enough? And so you adjust as you go along. I think the critical thing is for us to focus on making the most of what we have, addressing the challenges where they exist, as far as these dams are concerned.
And I wonder what other successes you talked about, because under the special development initiatives, that would be one machinery. But as NDA, what have you been able to do?
Oh yes, with the NDA, like the IPEP projects I mentioned. If you look at the IPEP projects, we have many schools have been built in the north. Some schools have been renovated. Boreholes, hundreds and hundreds of boreholes have been constructed for communities that would normally have traveled up to 5 kilometers to fetch water. In some areas too, we have had CHIPS compounds where people can have health access to maternity facilities or health services in their communities. And in some places too, roads have been constructed under the IPEP program. And with road construction, there is a kind of direct relationship between road construction and agriculture. Because for many communities, during the harvest season, it's often very difficult to transport from the villages to the towns. So a lot has happened in terms of road construction. There's also another very important thing to do with providing toilets in rural communities, but also in some of the urban areas. Water and sanitation problems tend to be very acute as you move out of the big cities. And even within big cities, but there are many places where they don't have toilets. The IPEP programs have seen the construction of many toilets in those communities, rural and urban. And that has really made a lot of difference to the lives of those communities.
What's funding been like to make sure that projects start and actually finish on time and they make the maximum benefit?
I think that with funding for these kind of projects as part of government-funded initiatives, it's always a big problem. And as you know, the economic crunch that has affected everybody globally and nationally, it's really imposed a huge on institutions. But what the NDA has done over the last year is a medium-term development strategy. And that whole process was done with development partners, the international development partners, international NGOs, civil society groups, our regional coordinating councils, the municipal, metropolitan and district assemblies, local communities, our traditional rulers. We work together to develop the medium-term development strategy. And in fact, that whole process was it was nested more or less in the office of the vice president. That's how importantly the government felt it was.
He recently announced a 5-year development strategy for northern Ghana. How does that fit into your activities?
We launched the program in November 26th last year, and the vice president was there to launch it. That's the strategic document I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes, he was there to launch. And what I've said, the process for developing that plan started a year before, and we held different meetings with development partners, communities, to just make sure that we were all on the same page. There was no duplication of resources, and that we had actually mapped out which are the areas that, say, the international agencies, USAID, following DFID, JICA, the Netherlands government, all those, the Danish government, where is it that they are working? The Turkish government, all of those agencies were there. What are they doing? The UN agencies. We work very closely with the UN resident coordinator and his team. Who is doing what? In that way, what the plan that we've come out with has the buy-in, and it also incorporates the government's programs as well as the priority areas of the development partners. So what we have therefore is a very comprehensive document to guide our work over the next 5 years, and that means that support it can come from what I call extra budget funding. It doesn't have to be money from the government, but it's also funding that we can raise through the kind of things we do with the development partners. And also, in a sense, say for example, if the total development plan is to cost $500,000, for example, what we need to know is that each of those partners, development partners, they have programs that fit into that plan. So some of that money is not necessarily going to come to NDA to spend, but it's just that we factor it in and look at how that addresses that particular need, working with the municipal MMDAs and the RCCs. So we don't actually necessarily have to be the people handling the money, but that you are making sure in playing your coordinating and facilitating role that investments are made in the north.
What's the people's response to all this? Do you get the sense that they are content with the progress of work of the NDA? What should they expect in this new year, in the coming years from the NDA?
I think what I'll say is that, as you know, we've had a lot of challenges up north with all sorts of, as I said, the development issues, problems are quite acute relative to other parts of the country. The 5 northern regions are the least developed on all the indicators. And so any effort that is made to support, to address some of those changes is something that communities welcome. We have a long way to go. And why do I say we have a long way to go? We have a long way to go because we need to really build confidence between ourselves and the communities. We also need to strengthen our own capacity to be able to deliver on the development strategy, the plan that we have developed. We need our own capacity, but also the capacity of our state and non-state partners to be able to make sure that we can implement. So, for example, regional coordinating councils, we work closely with them to make sure that they have their annual planning cycles and budgets that go to Parliament and so on. And some of that incorporates what we do. But then outside of that, we need to bring in the areas I have mentioned with development partners to see how these can work together to be able to deliver on our mandate and our objectives.
What's your final word before we take leave of you? The NDA obviously has a huge task and the challenges are glaring, and you've run into a few hitches, but I'm hoping that there's a plan to make all of this better. Yes. What is that plan? I
think fundamentally, the critical thing I want to say is that our belief is that when we're able to marshal the resources from state and non-state actors and make targeted, effective investments, working on the comparative advantage the North has in agriculture, in the kind of things that we have up north, agriculture and agriculture value chain, and so on and so forth. When we have done that, we're going to be able to solve some of the short-term, the kind of short-term problems we have, but also address our problems in a long-term basis. It's only when we can do that that the changes we want to see will happen.
Thank you so much for sitting with us this morning.
Thank you very much too.
Dr. Suleimana Abdullahi is the board chairman of the Northern Development Authority, NDA. He's been sharing some of their progress and success stories with us. A lot of projects underway by the NDA to improve the lot of people who live in the northern part of the country, 5 regions that they handle, and the goal is to make their lives better and open the north up for businesses. So it's a very open market, and they are open to ideas. If you want to get into business with the NDA, just connect with them on their website and they will be able to have a chat with you. The North is rife for development is a message that they want to send this morning. Breakfast live on GTV, and it's the month of February. It's love everywhere, and even those who may be older may have questions. So young people have tons and tons of questions about love. Today we are opening the couch for them to ask the experts all the questions they have about love and dating, because they need every skill to be able to survive from the gender that betrayed Jesus. We'll be back with Valerie, the love doctor, and our young people as they ask the question, what's love got to do with dating?